In the bitter winter of 1944, amidst the chaos of a war that had already claimed tens of millions of lives, a small but astonishing cultural shock was quietly taking place behind barbed wire. German prisoners of war, captured during the relentless Allied advance across Europe, found themselves confined in American-run camps. They were soldiers accustomed to the rigors of battle, trained to endure hunger, fatigue, and harsh winters, but nothing could have prepared them for what awaited inside these camps. American military rations, designed to sustain and boost morale for troops on the front lines, included items that seemed almost unbelievable to the European mind. Among the carefully packed cans of meat, beans, and chocolate were luxuries that German soldiers had long considered unattainable even in times of peace: ice cream and Coca-Cola. For the men who had fought in the unforgiving deserts of North Africa, the frozen landscapes of Russia, and the bombed-out cities of France, these items were more than mere food. They were symbols of an entirely different culture of war, a war in which sustenance could be indulgent, even joyful. According to contemporary accounts from POW diaries and later interviews, German soldiers could scarcely comprehend the idea that a prison camp in America could provide comforts that rivaled those of their homes, or that American soldiers themselves could consume these luxuries while actively engaged in combat. The phenomenon was not incidental. The United States military, by the time of the D-Day invasion in June 1944, had developed a highly sophisticated logistical system capable of delivering millions of rations per day across oceans. The goal was twofold: to maintain the physical health of American soldiers and to preserve morale at levels that historians now describe as unprecedented in modern warfare. The rations included canned meats, powdered eggs, coffee, chocolate bars, and the ubiquitous M&Ms, but more surprisingly, certain camps, particularly in the continental United States, had ice cream machines installed to produce fresh frozen treats for both American troops and, incidentally, their prisoners. These unexpected comforts did not go unnoticed. Historian Arthur Herman, in his book Freedom's Forge, notes that German posts were astonished not only by the abundance, but by the quality of the food supplied by their captors. Ice cream, Coca-Cola, and chocolate were a kind of bewildering indulgence, entirely alien to their experience of wartime Europe. In one particularly vivid account, a German soldier interned at Camp Shelby, Mississippi, recalled his first encounter with American rations. He wrote in his diary, "They handed me a can of Coca-Cola and a small carton of ice cream. I could not believe it. I had fought in France and seen men starve and suffer cold and hunger, and here I was in a prison camp, offered sweets as if this were a festival. This was more than a matter of dietary difference. It represented a clash of cultures, a war in which the victors, at least in terms of industrial and logistical capacity, could afford to treat even captured enemy soldiers with a level of care and civility that was almost unimaginable to those raised under the extreme hardships of Germany during the Third Reich." The story of German soldiers confronted with American rations is not merely anecdotal. The United States War Department, anticipating both logistical and propaganda advantages, documented the inclusion of these luxuries in official military manuals. According to War Department records, special rations and rations were occasionally supplemented with ice cream, soft drinks, and fresh fruit. This was particularly true for POWs held in camps within the United States, where supply lines were secure and the risk of shortages minimal. Yet, it is crucial to understand the psychological impact of this phenomenon. For men raised in a society under strict rationing and military discipline, the sudden exposure to abundance was a cognitive shock. Letters smuggled from POWs back to Germany described their bewilderment and even guilt. How could they reconcile the luxury of their temporary captivity with the ongoing suffering of their fellow countrymen still fighting or starving at home? The first taste of American ice cream and Coca-Cola was more than just a culinary surprise. It was a moment of cognitive dissonance. It challenged everything they had been taught about enemy behavior and human cruelty in war. And as we will see, it had repercussions far beyond the simple act of eating or drinking. By late 1944, the United States had perfected a logistical system unlike anything the world had seen before. The U.S. Army's Quartermaster Corps was supplying millions of troops scattered across Europe, the Pacific, and within the continental United States itself. Every day, trucks, trains, and cargo ships carried tons of food, clothing, and equipment to soldiers in combat zones and to prisoners held thousands of miles from the front lines. Among the provisions were the famous rations and sea rations. Rations were fresh, refrigerated meals intended for soldiers in secure locations. These included meats, dairy, baked goods, and fresh vegetables. Sea rations, in contrast, were canned meals designed for soldiers on the move, lightweight and calorie-dense but far less glamorous. Yet even sea rations included small indulgences, chocolate, candy, and at times, powdered ice cream. When it came to prisoners of war, the United States adhered strictly to the Geneva Convention, which mandated humane treatment. In practice, this meant that POWs were not only fed, but often received better nutrition than the average European civilian during wartime. Historian Arnold Kramer, in his definitive work Nazi Prisoners of War in America, notes that POWs in U.S. camps typically received 3 meals a day, sometimes supplemented with additional treats. For many German soldiers, Kramer writes, their experience in American camps was a revelation. They were fed regularly, cleanly, and with a variety of foods that had been unobtainable back home for years. The practicalities of this generosity were impressive. Camps like Camp Shelby, Mississippi, or Fort Devens, Massachusetts, had fully operational kitchens staffed by military cooks and even enlisted POWs themselves. Ice cream machines churned frozen treats daily, and Coca-Cola flowed freely from soda fountains, a drink that had become an emblem of American culture. These were not casual gestures. They were carefully managed morale strategies, intended both to maintain compliance among prisoners and to showcase the humane face of the United States in contrast to Nazi brutality. German soldiers were astounded. Accounts collected by Kramer and other historians reveal repeated disbelief. One former POW, Ludwig Hempel, recounted in a 1970 interview, "At first, we thought it was a trick. They told us we would get ice cream, and we laughed. How could they have ice cream in the middle of winter? But they did. And then came Coca-Cola. We could drink as much as we wanted. The contrast with Germany could not have been more stark. By 1944, food shortages in Germany were severe. Allied bombing campaigns had crippled industrial production, and rationing had become increasingly stringent. Sugar, butter, and meat were limited to tiny portions, while chocolate and other luxuries were almost entirely unavailable. For German soldiers raised on scarcity, the idea that captors could offer frozen treats and soda on a daily basis seemed surreal. Interestingly, this abundance had psychological effects that went beyond simple surprise. POWs quickly noticed differences in morale between those held in U.S. camps and those in German-run camps elsewhere. Historian Herman Kahn observes in his work The Science of War that American rations were not merely food. They were a tool of psychological warfare in reverse. They demonstrated that the enemy could be humane, efficient, and capable of abundance, undermining the narrative of Allied depravity that German propaganda had long promoted. The daily routine reinforced this perception. After roll call and work details, POWs would gather in mess halls where trays were laden with fresh bread, meat, and most astonishingly, ice cream. Cafeteria-style setups, staffed by American personnel and sometimes POW cooks, allowed prisoners to see that the rations were abundant, hygienically prepared, and often creatively arranged. Coca-Cola dispensers, a novelty even for many Americans, were a particular highlight. Some Germans struggled to reconcile the luxury with their indoctrinated worldview. Diary entries from Poes frequently mention disbelief, guilt, and confusion. A soldier at Camp Papago Park in Arizona wrote, "I have been taught to hate these Americans, but now they feed us better than my own family could in Berlin. Ice cream, chocolate, even soda. How is this possible?" Not all Germans reacted the same way. Some accepted the provisions with quiet gratitude, while others remained suspicious, fearing hidden motives or poisoned supplies. Yet even skepticism could not diminish the psychological power of the experience. Over time, Post began to internalize the reality. American captors were capable of extraordinary organization and generosity, and food, once merely sustenance, had become a subtle instrument of influence. The shock extended beyond taste. Many German soldiers marveled at the sheer quantity of calories. Typical U.S. rations for Poes could exceed 3,000 calories per day, often more than a soldier might consume at the front. Combined with recreational facilities, sports fields, and educational programs offered in some camps, this created an environment starkly different from the grim, punitive camps many German soldiers had known in the Soviet Union or even in their own country. As word spread among the prisoners, the legend of the ice cream and Coca-Cola camps grew. New arrivals were told to expect treats unimaginable in Europe. In letters and memoirs, former Poes would often begin their recollections with astonishment. The very first thing they saw upon entering camp was a mess hall stocked with sweets and soda, a symbol of a strange and overwhelming abundance. The astonishment of German prisoners of war at American rations was more than curiosity. It was a profound cultural shock, a collision of expectations and reality that few historians have captured in full. Diaries, letters, and post-war memoirs reveal a mixture of disbelief, guilt, and even admiration. These men had been trained to endure deprivation. They had witnessed and committed atrocities, survived harsh winters, and faced starvation in the decimated landscapes of wartime Europe. Yet in America, their most basic assumptions about the enemy and the nature of war were suddenly challenged. One account comes from Karl-Heinz Lange, a soldier captured during the Ardennes Offensive in December 1944. He wrote in his diary, "We arrived at the camp, cold and hungry. Expecting only beans and bread, I saw the long mess hall, gleaming in the morning sun, with trays of meat, bread, and small cartons of ice cream. The American guards smiled, offered us Coca-Cola, and waited while we filled our trays. I could not believe it. I thought it a trick, perhaps poisoned, but it was real." Lange's reaction was typical. Poes frequently expected rations to be minimal, rationed, or unpleasant. Some carried mental images of Allied cruelty, forged from propaganda and fear. The reality of regular meals, generous portions, and occasional indulgences completely contradicted their expectations. Ice cream, for instance, was described as a miracle in a cup by several former prisoners. Even those who had tasted sweetened treats in Germany during peacetime remarked that the quality and frequency in American camps were extraordinary. Coca-Cola, too, held a special fascination. Beyond its sweetness, it represented a foreign culture, a symbol of American abundance and modernity. Some posts reported drinking the soda with a mixture of delight and hesitation. Many had never tasted carbonated soft drinks before. One soldier noted, "It was more than refreshment. It was an experience I had never imagined. I could not reconcile it with the stories I had heard of Americans as cruel, wasteful enemies." But the psychological impact extended beyond taste. According to historian Arnold Kramer, the abundance and quality of American rations created an unintended form of cultural re-education. Poes observed the efficiency, cleanliness, and planning required to feed thousands of men daily. They watched American soldiers receiving similar rations while actively engaged in combat, contrasting sharply with their own experiences of rationing and scarcity. For some, this led to a subtle internal questioning of Nazi propaganda. Letters and diary entries suggest that posts began to reassess their understanding of the enemy. One soldier, interned at Camp Papago Park in Arizona, wrote, "I was taught that Americans were decadent and weak. Yet here they are feeding us better than my own family eats in Berlin. Perhaps they are not so different after all." Notably, Poes often compared their American experience with the conditions of Allied prisoners in German camps. Reports from the Red Cross and post-war investigations revealed stark contrasts. Allied Poes in German camps often faced food shortages, minimal medical care, and harsh labor. For German soldiers in America, the situation was almost the opposite. Nutritious meals, medical attention, recreational activities, and even education opportunities were available. Ice cream and Coca-Cola were symbols of this broader system of care, a tangible demonstration of a humane approach that challenged deeply held preconceptions. At Camp Shelby, Mississippi, a group of German soldiers were allowed to participate in the preparation of meals. Historian James K. Russell notes that being involved in food preparation allowed Poes to see the logistics firsthand. They understood that this abundance was not random, but a product of planning, efficiency, and industrial capacity. It impressed many and undermined stereotypes about American wastefulness or lack of discipline. The emotional impact was often complex. While some Poes felt gratitude, others wrestled with guilt. Letters sent home sometimes expressed embarrassment. Why should they, as prisoners, receive such treatment when their fellow soldiers were still fighting or when civilians in Germany were starving? A soldier at Fort Devens wrote, "We are treated like kings in a foreign land while our families face hunger. I cannot feel pride, only wonder and shame." This psychological nuance reveals that the story of ice cream and Coca-Cola in POW camps was not merely anecdotal or humorous. It was a moment of cultural and emotional revelation, a reminder that even small comforts can carry enormous symbolic weight. Ice cream was more than a treat, it was a representation of abundance, organization, and moral contrast. Coca-Cola was more than a drink, it was an emblem of a foreign society operating on principles unfamiliar to the captives. Generosity, efficiency, and humane treatment even of enemies. The POW experience with American rations also had lasting effects after the war. Many former German soldiers recall these experiences in interviews decades later, emphasizing the surprise and even admiration they felt for their captors. Historian Arthur Herman notes that these memories contributed to a post-war understanding among German Poes that not all Americans were the caricature of indulgent, lazy consumers. They were organized, capable, and humane. In essence, a cup of ice cream or a bottle of soda became an unexpected ambassador of cultural diplomacy. The story of German soldiers astonished by ice cream and Coca-Cola is not just a tale of culinary indulgence. It is a story that reflects the political, logistical, and psychological dimensions of World War II. The United States did not provide lavish rations to prisoners merely out of kindness. There was a calculated rationale behind the abundance: adherence to the Geneva Convention, propaganda value, and long-term strategic thinking about post-war relations. By 1944, the U.S. military understood the power of perception. Captured enemy soldiers could be used as instruments of propaganda, demonstrating that American values included fairness and humanity even toward the enemy. According to historian Arnold Kramer, the humane treatment of German Poes was designed to show the world, including neutral and Axis nations, that the U.S. waged a morally superior war. Camps with ice cream machines, recreational programs, and generous rations were part of a deliberate strategy to contrast Allied practices with the often brutal and inhumane conditions found in German and Japanese prisoner camps. The political dimension extended beyond the war itself. American policymakers recognized that well-treated poses could contribute to a smoother post-war transition. Many German soldiers interned in U.S. camps were eventually released and returned to civilian life. Their experiences, particularly the memory of humane treatment and surprising indulgences, often influenced their attitudes toward the United States after the war. Historian James K. Russell notes that the POW experience softened post-war anti-American sentiment among many German soldiers, creating a reservoir of goodwill that had long-term diplomatic and social consequences. Yet, the irony of this situation was striking. These were men who had fought fiercely for the Nazi war effort, participating in a conflict marked by immense suffering and brutality. And yet, in captivity, they were offered luxuries that were unavailable to most Americans on the front lines and certainly denied to civilians living under occupation in Europe. Ice cream and Coca-Cola, symbols of American consumer abundance, were now in the hands of the very soldiers who, days or weeks earlier, had sought to destroy that abundance. The reaction of German POWs underscores the complex interplay of morality, psychology, and culture in wartime. According to memoirs collected in the post-war period, many soldiers were torn between gratitude and disbelief. Some wrote home with a mixture of awe and embarrassment, describing the rations as luxurious or fit for kings. Others internalized a deeper lesson. The logistical and industrial power of the United States was vast, and its approach to war included not only military might but a capacity for humane efficiency that contrasted sharply with the extremism they had witnessed and enforced within their own army. Even American soldiers occasionally marveled at the generosity afforded to prisoners. While frontline troops sometimes received less varied rations, POWs in safe domestic camps were given privileges that highlighted the industrial and logistical superiority of the United States. Historian Arthur Herman observes, "It was an extraordinary inversion of expectations. The victors treated the vanquished with care and attention, revealing an aspect of American power that was as psychological as it was material." There is also a broader cultural lesson embedded in this story. Ice cream and Coca-Cola were more than simple luxuries. They were symbols of what historians call the American way of war, a philosophy that combined technological innovation, logistical mastery, and psychological insight. Feeding the enemy well did not weaken the U.S. military. It enhanced its moral authority and reinforced the idea that victory could be achieved without abandoning principles of decency and order. The final irony is perhaps the most profound. Many of these POWs returned to Germany, carrying vivid memories of their captivity that contrasted sharply with the destruction and deprivation they had left behind. In the years after the war, these stories circulated among veterans and civilians alike. The narrative of the astonished German soldier offered ice cream and Coca-Cola in the middle of a global conflict became a symbol of the contradictions of war, brutality on the battlefield coexisting with unexpected kindness deprivation alongside, abundance fear tempered by curiosity and enmity softened by generosity. Historians dispute the exact number of POWs who experienced these luxuries firsthand, but the phenomenon was widespread enough to leave a lasting impression on the collective memory of the war. Memoirs, interviews, and archival photographs show men enjoying American-style recreation, consuming treats they had thought impossible, and grappling with the moral and cultural implications of their treatment. Ultimately, the story of German POWs and American rations is a lesson in perspective. It reminds us that even in the darkest periods of human conflict, small acts of humanity, ice cream, a soda, a warm meal can have profound psychological and cultural effects. It underscores the power of logistics, planning, and foresight, not only to win wars but to shape attitudes and memories long after the guns have fallen silent. And so, the men who had marched into battle, who had fought and often killed in the name of a regime built on ideology and fear, found themselves in captivity confronted by a simple, almost absurd generosity. Ice cream and Coca-Cola, a mundane luxury to Americans, became a symbol of a new world order, a hint that even in war, morality and abundance could coexist. Decades later, the story of German prisoners tasting ice cream and sipping Coca-Cola in American camps remains one of the most striking, humanizing episodes of World War II. It is a story that challenges our assumptions about the enemy, about war, and about the small yet profound ways that humanity can persist even amid global conflict. For the men who had marched under the banners of the Third Reich, trained to believe in discipline, sacrifice, and unwavering loyalty to a regime, the experience of being treated with unexpected generosity was transformative. Ice cream, a simple frozen dessert, and Coca-Cola, a sweet effervescent drink, became symbols far greater than themselves. They represented a world in which logistics, morality, and efficiency could coexist. They represented a society capable of feeding and comforting even those who had once sought to destroy it. Many former posts recounted, later in life, that the memory of those rations stayed with them longer than the memory of battle, wounds, or even imprisonment. Historian Arnold Kramer emphasizes that the psychological impact of humane treatment often outweighed the physical hardships of captivity. Men who experienced this abundance returned home with a changed perspective on the United States and, for some, on humanity itself. Yet there is irony in this tale that cannot be overlooked. These were soldiers who had fought in some of the most brutal theaters of war: Normandy, the Ardennes, Italy, and yet they found themselves confronted not with punishment, but with hospitality. The war they had known, defined by scarcity, fear, and ideological indoctrination, was temporarily replaced with a reality of abundance, comfort, and human decency. Ice cream and Coca-Cola, items so mundane to Americans, became instruments of moral reflection, symbols of the contradictions inherent in conflict. This story also serves as a lesson in the subtle power of logistics, planning, and foresight. It reminds us that war is not only fought with weapons, strategy, and courage, but also with organization, culture, and psychological insight. The United States' ability to feed, maintain, and even pamper enemy soldiers highlights a level of sophistication often overlooked in popular narratives of the war. It demonstrates that victory is not only measured in battles won, but in the hearts and minds shaped by even the smallest acts. In the end, the tale of ice cream and Coca-Cola in American POW camps stands as a paradox. War is a time of unimaginable cruelty and suffering, yet within it can exist moments of humanity that seem almost absurd against the larger backdrop of destruction. It is a reminder that even in captivity, even amid conflict, the human capacity for surprise, indulgence, and kindness endures. For the astonished German soldier, the frozen dessert and fizzy soda were more than nourishment. They were proof that the world could be different from what he had been taught, that abundance could coexist with struggle, and that decency could exist even in the shadow of war. And perhaps the most lasting irony is this: history often remembers the generals, the battles, and the strategy, but sometimes it is a simple taste, a small indulgence, that leaves the deepest imprint on memory. Ice cream and Coca-Cola in the midst of one of the deadliest wars in human history remind us that the human story is composed not only of victories and losses, but of small, unexpected acts that illuminate what is possible even in the darkest times. In the end, these men returned to a shattered Europe, carrying with them a peculiar memory that their enemies could be generous, that comfort could exist in captivity, and that a cup of ice cream or a sip of soda could, in its own way, tell a story of hope, humanity, and the surprising contradictions of history.